everyone is stuck inside. And save the hardcore introvert, everyone is craving more human connections. Yes, of course, your podcast can help provide that, but think what else you can do beyond your podcast. Hello and welcome to another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. Last night, I went outside on my tiny little patio and smoked a cigar with 20 other people. Well, first off, it wasn't a cigar, it was a pipe. And those 20 people weren't actually with me. Earlier in the week, my friend Rachel made tiny poems on tiny typewriters for dozens of people. Again, they weren't with her physically. My friend Addy did a brainstorming session last night with lots and lots of people attending, getting brainstormed, except they weren't there with her in person. All of the ones I mentioned previously were done using live video. Not on LinkedIn. We did live video with Instagram for the three of us that I mentioned over there. And in my case, I sat out on the patio, fired up my pipe. Well, first off, I packed my pipe. I talked about the pipe tobacco that I use. I talked about the pipe. And I just had conversations with people. It was kind of fun. They connected from all around. Well, was anybody international? I don't think they were at that time. They've had some international travels. Anyhow, same thing for Rachel. She was making these tiny poems with people watching her on Instagram and watching her do the thing that she did. As with Addy's brainstorming session, more business focused. People who were tuning in to watch her do it live and help her live created the thing. You probably have seen and heard of other people doing similar things nowadays as we find ourselves all contained, homebound, socially isolated, all the words you want to use. You know, we're feeling that as podcasters, right? You're feeling that as a podcaster, I'm sure. I'm feeling it as a regular person as well. I miss lots of connections. And so we can do that. You know, yesterday I talked about things you can do modifying your podcast in the reality that we face today. This new world we wake up into where everybody is impacted by this pandemic. And I talked about addressing that. Well, this is one of the ways you can address it without actually editing and changing your format for your podcast. But still, you can do something. If you need to reach out to people in your industry, but changing your podcast doesn't make a lot of sense, and talk about how the pandemic is impacting your business, think about ways beyond your podcast. Use your podcast as a voice to say, hey, if you want to get deeper and talk about these super important things, I'm over here on this thing doing that. Use your podcast as a sounding board to drive traffic to those other things. Those other things don't have to be business focused if you don't want them to be. I mean, that's totally up to you. They can just simply be human connection pieces. Sure. And they don't have to be live video. I mean, that's popular, but, you know, it's not everybody's cup of tea. I get it. I mean, here I am. If you're listening to this, I'm actually recording this as a live video right now. So it makes sense for me, but it might not make sense for you to do live video. Cool. Don't. How about a newsletter? There are lots of services like Tiny Newsletter. No, they're not a sponsor of the program, but services like that which let you get a newsletter up and running pretty quickly. So you can keep people informed about whatever you want to keep them informed about, whatever thoughts and ideas and opinions you might have related to the pandemic or something else. It's completely up to you. But you can write those thoughts down. Maybe it's time to launch a new Twitter account. I don't know. Lots of new social opportunities that are out there. And yeah, I suppose also you could start a brand new podcast if you wanted to. It's up to you. What's going to make you feel better as you're connecting with other people? And what is it that other people want to get from you? And how can those things meet, right? It's that Venn diagram overlap. It's your needs and their needs. And is there something else that you can do beyond your podcast that fulfills both of those needs? So in my example, I was out smoking a pipe. Okay, probably not a whole lot of need for that in that relates to the podcasting space. So sometimes it's just purely fun. When Addy did her brainstorming session, I mean, that's what she does. She's a planner of things, or she helps people do this, so it totally fits inside of her world. There's no rules around this. But it's got to make sense for you first and foremost, and hopefully make sense for your listeners. And here's the thing. Maybe not all of your listeners. Maybe just the ones that you do share certain ideas and passions with. I'm not suggesting you go out and totally commit to a brand new media property that you have to build forever. I don't think that's what you have to do. If you want to do it, fine. Who knows what you're going to find out? I am suggesting that you just go try something new that's outside of the podcast. Let your podcast audience know you're doing this new thing to see if they're interested in watching or listening or reading to what you have to say. Not all of them will be, and that's fine. But also reach out to your non-podcast listening contacts, your friends, your family. Let them in on the new thing that you're doing. They might like it. They might become an audience for you. More importantly, it gets you getting out without getting out. It gets you out in the world, but in a new virtual way. It allows you to stretch those muscles that you have. And the cool thing is, we podcasters probably have an advantage over other people. We're used to talking into the microphone on a regular basis. We're used to putting out content on a regular basis. We're used to making content that people like and that resonates with people. So take all those skills that you have and channel it in another direction. Especially if this pandemic thing has you really down and has a group of your community really down, how can you fulfill that need without interrupting what you're doing with your podcast? That's what I want you to think about. I also want you to share this episode with another podcaster who you think has something that they might be able to share beyond their podcast. I know really talented people that are funny in different ways and smart in different ways, and they could really benefit from doing something more. I think they would benefit mentally from their own mental health, and they would help benefit people who are stuck. So share this idea with them. Tell them you saw it on Podcast Pontifications, or watched it on Podcast Pontifications, or read it on Podcast Pontifications. However you want to share it with them. And I hope it goes well. And I hope you're well. I'm well. And I shall be back tomorrow with yet another Podcast Pontifications. Cheers.